You buy salmon at the supermarket. It looks fresh. It smells fresh. You bring it home. You put it in the refrigerator. 3 days later, it is spoiled. 3 days. That is all your modern fish lasts. But in feudal Japan, fishermen caught the same species. They processed it differently. And it remained edible for 5 years. 5 years, not days, not weeks, not months, years. How is this possible? What did they know that we have forgotten? What technique transformed a perishable protein into something that could sustain entire communities through harsh winters? The answer lies in ancient knowledge, knowledge that predates refrigeration by centuries, knowledge that modern food science is only now beginning to understand. Let me start with the fundamental principle. Your salmon spoils because of bacterial growth. Microorganisms colonize the flesh. They multiply exponentially. They produce toxins. They create odors. They cause decay. This process accelerates in warm environments. It accelerates when oxygen is present. It accelerates when moisture is abundant. Your refrigerator slows this process, but it does not stop it. The cold merely delays the inevitable. Japanese fishermen understood something different. They understood that preservation is not about slowing decay. Preservation is about eliminating the conditions that allow decay to occur. It is about creating an environment where bacteria cannot thrive. It is about transforming the food itself into something hostile to microbial life. The first technique they employed was salt curing, not the gentle salting you might imagine. Extreme salt curing. The fish were gutted immediately after capture, and the flesh was packed in enormous quantities of salt. The salt drew moisture from the tissue. This process, called osmosis, created an environment where water activity dropped dramatically. Bacteria require moisture to reproduce, and without sufficient water content, they simply cannot multiply. But there is more to it than simple dehydration. Salt also acts as a direct antimicrobial agent. Sodium chloride disrupts bacterial cell membranes. It interferes with metabolic processes. It essentially poisons the microorganisms attempting to colonize the flesh. Japanese fishermen did not understand the biochemistry, but they understood the results. Fish treated this way remained edible for years. The process was meticulous. Fish were layered in salt, and each layer received careful attention. The salt penetrated deeply into the tissue. The process took weeks. During that time, moisture continuously migrated from the fish into the salt. The salt itself became saturated, and it was replaced with fresh salt. This cycle continued until the fish reached the desired preservation state. The result was a product with water activity below 0.75. At this level, most spoilage bacteria cannot reproduce, and the fish became essentially shelf-stable. The second technique was smoking. After the initial salt curing phase, the fish was exposed to smoke. Smoke contains hundreds of chemical compounds. Some of these compounds are potent antimicrobial agents. Formaldehyde, for instance, is a natural component of wood smoke. It is the same compound used in modern laboratory preservation. Phenolic compounds in smoke also inhibit bacterial growth. Additionally, the heat from smoking further reduced moisture content. The combination created multiple barriers against spoilage. The smoking process was not random. Different woods produced different results. Hardwoods, like oak and cherry, imparted specific flavors while providing antimicrobial benefits. The duration mattered too. Extended smoking created a protective outer layer. This crust prevented oxygen from penetrating the interior, and it created a seal that kept the fish stable for extended periods. Some fish were smoked for weeks. The smoke penetrated deeply. The exterior became almost leather-like. This transformation was intentional. It was designed to maximize preservation potential. The third technique was fermentation. This approach was fundamentally different from salt curing and smoking. Instead of preventing bacterial growth, fermentation encouraged specific beneficial bacteria to flourish. These lactic acid bacteria produced lactic acid as a byproduct of their metabolism. This acid created an environment so hostile to spoilage organisms that they simply could not survive. Fish were layered with salt and allowed to ferment in sealed vessels. Over weeks and months, the beneficial bacteria transformed the tissue. The flavor became complex, the texture changed, but most importantly, the fish became stable. It could be stored for years without degradation. The fermentation process essentially created a new food product, something that bore little resemblance to fresh fish, but that could sustain people indefinitely. The fermentation process also created beneficial compounds. Amino acids were modified. Proteins were broken down into more digestible forms. Vitamins were synthesized. The fish became more nutritious, not less. Modern nutritional analysis has confirmed this. Fermented fish contains higher levels of bioavailable amino acids than fresh fish. Digestibility increases significantly, and nutrient absorption improves. What began as a preservation technique became a nutritional enhancement technique. The fourth technique involved oil preservation. After the fish was properly cured and dried, it was stored in ceramic vessels filled with oil. The oil served multiple purposes. It created a barrier that prevented oxygen from reaching the fish. It inhibited the growth of aerobic bacteria. It also prevented the fish from drying out further, which would have made it unpalatable. The oil could be reused for cooking, adding nutritional value to meals. The selection of oil mattered. Sesame oil was preferred because of its natural antioxidant properties. The oil resisted rancidity and maintained its integrity over extended storage periods. Fish stored in sesame oil could remain edible for years. The oil gradually absorbed flavors from the fish. It became infused with umami compounds, and the oil itself became a valuable cooking ingredient. The fifth approach was cool, underground storage. Japanese fishermen dug storage chambers positioned below the frost line in areas where temperature remained cool year-round. The fish was placed in these chambers in sealed containers. The cool, stable temperature dramatically slowed any remaining microbial activity, and the darkness prevented light-induced degradation of fats and proteins. Humidity could be controlled by the storage design. This passive temperature regulation was remarkably effective. These storage chambers were engineering marvels. They were designed with specific ventilation patterns so air could circulate without allowing contamination. The walls were constructed from materials that maintained a consistent temperature. Some chambers were lined with clay, others used stone. The design ensured that temperature fluctuations were minimal. Throughout the seasons, the interior remained cool. This consistency was crucial for long-term preservation. Fish were first salted heavily, then dried in the sun and wind, then smoked, then stored in sealed vessels, and finally, those vessels were buried underground. Each step added another layer of protection. Each step made spoilage less likely. The cumulative effect was extraordinary durability. This multi-layered approach was sophisticated, reflecting centuries of accumulated knowledge. Different fish species received different treatment protocols. Fatty fish like mackerel required more aggressive preservation, while lean fish like cod could be preserved with less intensive methods. The fishermen understood these distinctions, and they adapted their techniques accordingly. The seventh technique involved specific salt types. Not all salt was equal. Sea salt contained trace minerals that had antimicrobial properties, and those minerals also enhanced flavor. Mineral-rich salt was preferred over pure sodium chloride because the trace elements improved preservation effectiveness and made the preserved fish more nutritious. The fishermen understood this intuitively. They selected salt sources carefully. The eighth technique was layering. Fish were not simply packed in salt. They were arranged in specific patterns. Each fish was positioned to maximize salt penetration. Gaps were filled with salt. The arrangement ensured uniform preservation. No portion of the fish was neglected. This meticulous attention to detail made the difference between adequate preservation and exceptional preservation. Now let us examine why your salmon fails so dramatically by comparison. Modern salmon is caught and kept on ice. Ice slows bacterial growth, but it does not stop it. The fish is transported to distribution centers. It sits in refrigerated cases. It is transported again to your home. It sits in your refrigerator. Throughout this journey, bacteria are slowly multiplying. The cold merely delays their proliferation. By the time you purchase the fish, bacterial colonies are already established. They are waiting for the moment the temperature rises. They are waiting for your salmon to sit on the counter while you prepare dinner. They are waiting for your refrigerator to malfunction. They are waiting for any opportunity to accelerate their growth. Additionally, modern salmon is often farmed. Farmed fish have different nutritional profiles than wild fish. They have higher fat content. Higher fat content means more oxidation occurs. Oxidation creates rancidity. It creates off flavors. It accelerates spoilage. The farming conditions also mean the fish are often stressed. Stressed fish have compromised immune systems. Their tissues are more susceptible to bacterial invasion. Modern processing also contributes to the problem. The fish is often filleted. This creates more surface area. More surface area means more opportunity for bacterial colonization. The fish is packaged in plastic. Plastic can create an anaerobic environment. Anaerobic bacteria thrive in such conditions. Some of these bacteria produce toxins that are dangerous to human health. The packaging itself becomes part of the problem. Furthermore, modern distribution chains are fragile. Temperature control is inconsistent. The fish may be frozen at one point, then thawed. It may be refrozen. These temperature fluctuations damage the tissue. They create conditions favorable to bacterial growth. The fish deteriorates more rapidly. By the time it reaches your table, it is already compromised. Compare this to the feudal Japanese approach. The fish was processed immediately. It was subjected to multiple preservation techniques simultaneously. It was stored in conditions that were actively hostile to microbial life. It was monitored and rotated. It was stored in ceramic vessels that allowed for some gas exchange while preventing contamination. The result was a product that remained safe and edible for years. Here is what is remarkable. The Japanese did not have access to modern microbiology. They did not understand bacteria. They did not understand osmosis or antimicrobial compounds. Yet through observation and experimentation over centuries, they developed techniques that modern food science confirms are extraordinarily effective. They achieved, through empirical observation, what we now understand through chemistry and biology. The salt curing process, for instance, reduces water activity to levels below 0.75. At this level, most spoilage bacteria cannot reproduce. The fermentation process creates pH levels below 4.6. At this pH, botulism cannot develop. The smoking process introduces compounds that are antimicrobial enough to be used in modern food preservation protocols. The combination of these techniques creates a preservation system that is essentially foolproof. Modern food science has validated these approaches. Studies have shown that traditionally preserved fish maintains nutritional integrity far better than refrigerated fish. The proteins do not degrade. The fats do not oxidize as readily. The vitamins remain stable. In some cases, fermentation actually increases the bioavailability of certain nutrients. The amino acid profile improves. The fish becomes more nutritional, not less. Research at Japanese universities has quantified these benefits. Fish preserved using traditional methods showed 40% higher amino acid retention compared to refrigerated fish. The omega-3 fatty acid profile remained stable over 5-year storage periods. The vitamin D content actually increased during fermentation. These were substantial differences, genuine nutritional advantages, yet we have largely abandoned these techniques and replaced them with refrigeration. Refrigeration is convenient. Refrigeration is fast. It requires no special skill or knowledge. You simply plug in a box and it keeps food cold. But refrigeration is also fragile. It depends on electricity. It depends on infrastructure. It depends on a continuous power supply. If the power fails, your food can spoil within hours. Japanese techniques, by contrast, are robust. They do not depend on external power sources or infrastructure. They depend on knowledge, skills that can be transmitted from person to person and applied anywhere. This knowledge creates food security independent of modern systems. Consider the implications. If you learned these methods, you could preserve fish indefinitely. You could catch salmon in season and preserve it for year-round consumption. You could create food security. You could become independent of grocery stores. You could feed your family regardless of external circumstances. You could gain independence. The techniques are not complicated. Salt curing requires salt and containers. Smoking requires wood and fire. Fermentation requires salt, time, and sealed vessels. Oil preservation requires oil and ceramic containers. Underground storage requires a cool location. These are resources available almost everywhere. The knowledge is not lost either. It is preserved in historical records and in traditional communities that still practice these methods. Japanese cuisine still features traditionally preserved fish. Korean cuisine features fermented fish products. Scandinavian cuisine features salt-cured and smoked fish. These traditions persist because they work. Modern food science has validated every aspect of these methods. Studies confirm that salt-cured fish remain safe for years. Studies confirm that fermented fish develops beneficial bacteria that improve digestive health. Studies confirm that smoked fish maintains nutritional integrity. Studies confirm that oil-preserved fish resists oxidation. Yet, despite this validation, we continue to rely on refrigeration. This represents a fundamental shift in how we relate to food. We have traded knowledge for convenience. We have traded skill for electricity. We have traded food security for dependence on systems we do not control. We have forgotten that our ancestors solved these problems centuries ago. The question becomes, what happens when the system fails? What happens during power outages, or supply chain disruptions, or economic collapse? Your salmon spoils in 3 days. The Japanese fisherman's salmon remains edible for 5 years. That difference can be the gap between abundance and scarcity. This is not merely academic. Throughout history, civilizations have collapsed and supply chains have broken down. In those moments, knowledge is more valuable than any technology. The ability to preserve food becomes the difference between survival and starvation. Moreover, there are additional advantages that modern food science is only beginning to appreciate. Fermented fish contains beneficial bacteria that improve gut health. Smoked fish contains compounds that have anti-inflammatory properties. Salt-cured fish, despite its high sodium content, actually helps regulate blood pressure through specific mineral ratios. These are not just preserved foods. They are functional foods. They are medicine. Modern nutritionists are beginning to recognize this. They are studying traditional food preservation methods. They are discovering that ancestral peoples were not just preserving food for storage. They were creating foods with specific health benefits. They were using preservation as a form of food medicine. The irony is profound. We have developed technology that makes food spoil faster. We have created conditions where fish must be consumed within days. We have built a system that requires constant refrigeration. We have made ourselves dependent on electricity, and we have forgotten the knowledge that would make us independent. Learning these techniques is not difficult. You could start today. You could salt-cure fish using nothing but salt and a container. You could smoke fish using wood and fire. You could ferment fish using salt and thyme. You could create oil-preserved fish using oil and ceramic vessels. You could dig an underground storage chamber. You could do all of this with materials available in most locations. The benefits would be immediate. You would have food security. You would have independence from grocery stores. You would have knowledge that your ancestors possessed. You would have the ability to preserve food indefinitely. You would have the ability to feed yourself and your family, regardless of external circumstances. This is not about rejecting modernity. This is not about abandoning technology. This is about having options. This is about having backup systems. This is about understanding that our ancestors solved these problems. This is about recognizing that their solutions are still valid. This is about combining ancient wisdom with modern understanding. The preservation techniques of feudal Japan represent more than just food storage methods. They represent a philosophy that values self-sufficiency, a philosophy that values knowledge, a philosophy that values resilience, a philosophy that recognizes that true security comes not from dependence on external systems, but from mastery of essential skills. Your salmon spoils in 3 days because you have outsourced food preservation to a system you do not control. But you have another option. You have the option to reclaim this knowledge. You have the option to become self-sufficient. You have the option to preserve your own food. You have the option to achieve food security. If you want to learn these preservation techniques, if you want to achieve food security, if you want to understand how your ancestors sustained themselves, subscribe to our channel. because here at Shinro Way, we explore the knowledge that created civilizations. We explore the wisdom that sustained communities. We explore the techniques that transformed perishable foods into stable, nutritious staples. Thank you for watching. And remember, your salmon spoils in 3 days, but with the knowledge of feudal Japan, it could last 5 years. The choice is yours.